Yep, to the yep. You already know what time it is, man. It's your girl P.O.C. Turn your radios up, spread the word, spread the message. You already know what time it is, man. Each and every Friday, we got a jam-packed show for you. Yes, you. We got a special guest on the line with us right now. Today is Friday. We amplified right now. We excited right now to be speaking with this guest because when we think about environmental justice, I know we talk a little bit about how it affects us as Black Americans, but we also have a brown community that we serve and we want to be a part of as well. So I feel like when we have these conversations, it connects us more and we become stronger together. So I got Abel on the line with me right now. Good morning, Abel. How you feeling? Introduce yourself and let the people know exactly who you're listening to.
Hey, good morning, everyone. My name is Abel Luna. I'm part of the Migrant Justice team based out of Burlington, Vermont, and really excited to be here with all of you to share about our work and the work that we're doing and why do we do it.
No doubt. And am I saying your name correctly?
Yeah. It's Abel or Abel. It's fine.
Okay, I just want to make sure I'm saying I want to be
Sure.
respectful for sure. I want to make sure I'm being respectful. And can you break it down? Just your organization in general. What do you all do? Especially like in a city like Vermont. You know what I mean? you don't even think people will live there that's not white. You know what I'm saying? So what does that really mean, and what does that look like?
Yeah. Just really quickly, for people that are not too familiar with Vermont, Vermont is up pretty much really close to Canada, border with Canada. And the majority of the community, the migrant community that it's working and living here in Vermont, it's working on the dairy industry. So Vermont is huge on dairy. A lot of some of the most famous brand for products and milks like Ben& Jerry's, Cabbage Cheese, Agrimark, a lot of the things that you see on the shelves on your stores. A lot of those products are, the milk is coming from Vermont. And so Migrant Justice's work, it started back in 2009 after the death of a young farm worker named Jose Obed Santis Cruz, who died on a workplace accident on a dairy farm. One of the gutter scrapers, the machine that cleans the cows of the waste, pretty much strangled him to death. That's a death that could have been prevented if the right equipment, the right staffing had been in place. But that was really the birth of Migrant Justice. That was when the conversation about who's maintaining and sustaining, some of the most famous brands that, when it comes to dairy, cheese, yogurt. And that was when the conversation started, when the community started to come together, to fight back and to see how we could, prevent this from happening again. And if it does, what can we do? What are rights that we have? And so that's when Migrant Justice started, really focusing on four main things. So, being in Vermont, if you're, a brown person, you're a person of color, you're, near Canada, the experience of the community was that, if you're driving, you're in the hospital, if you were shopping for food, if you're brown, you were going to get detained, pulled over, asked about your immigration status. And a lot of the time that ended up in families being deported.
Yeah.
So what was happening is the police was doing the job of immigration. So that was one of the things that we started to focus, how to stop the collaboration between local police, state police, and, the immigration system. And so, we passed one of the strongest and most comprehensive policies in the country called the Fair and Impartial Policing Policy.
Congratulations.
Just continue that collaboration. Thank you. And so that's really, one of the things that Migrant Justice has focused on. The other one is the right to move, free around the state, regardless of where you are, what color you are, that doesn't matter if you have a legal status or not. You have the right to a driver license in Vermont. Vermont is very rural. The shopping center, the hospital, some of the things that people need to access the most are really far and remote. And so, that coupled with, if you leave the farm, if you leave your workplace, you might get, picked up by or stopped by the police and turned over to immigration. And so, a lot of different issues. And so, one of the things that the community, when in the meetings that we were having, in the conversations that we were having, they were like, okay, we need to move freely without being discriminated against. And so, we fought for a driver license, and in Vermont, it doesn't matter who you are, where you're from, you have the right to a driver license. But those are two things. And now we've turned our attention to sort of the right to work and live with dignity on those farms. We have a license, we have one of the strongest policies in the country, but people are still, struggling when it comes to, working 12 hours, 14 hours, no lunch break, or coming back home, to sleep with overcrowded housing conditions. You have 2 to 3 people sharing a room. You have bed bugs. Sometimes you have cockroaches, mice. There's a lot of things happening. Issues on the when it comes to the housing in the workplace. And so we're focusing on what we call now Meal with Dignity, which is a
Milk with dignity.
program. Yep, Meal with Dignity, which is a program that brings the fight to big corporations that are taking the money home, all the money at the end of the day, such as Ben and Jerry's, Hannaford's, and other big companies.
Yeah.
Ben
Abel,
Jerry's.
let me ask you this question, right? Because you're giving us a lot of information and we need this information because some of us don't know these things are happening, right? Because we live in our own little bubbles or we live in our own states that we don't know how other people are being affected. So just simply when it comes down to the word migrant, you all have taken that word and created an organization around it. Some folks look at this word and they see it as a bad word, like something similar to the N word or whatever. So when you look at the word migrant, how have you transferred that word and made it more positive? So people, when they read or when they look at what your organization is doing, they see that you're doing the work for the people.
Yeah, that's an awesome question. I never really thought about that, but I think in Vermont and a lot of in the US, some of the most the hardest job and the dangerous work is done by migrant workers in a lot of places in the country, and so I think in Vermont that is the case. And for a long time, if you're a migrant worker, if you're a person of color, a brown person, if you're seen in Vermont, there was this stigma where like, okay, if you're brown, you're Vermont is pretty wide, and that was the reality. Vermont is pretty wide, and so there was a discrimination based on your color. If you're brown, you might get police called over, you might get immigration called over, and so the majority of the communities from Mexico, some people from Guatemala, Central America, and it's really a migrant community. People coming from all over, not just Mexico, but all over the world, all over the place. And that's how we identify as migrant workers. And we for a long time we lived under fear because we were migrant workers, and the police could pick us over and turn us into border patrol or afraid of immigration. But we fought back. We as a community were empowered. We got empowered, and now we're fighting back.
And you're fighting back in a good way, in a big way. You know what I mean? I feel like what you all are doing in the organization is making a lot of noise. And that's one of the reasons why I want to make sure that we had you on our Eco Word show, because I feel like this conversation needs to be continued and talked about on a larger scale. And that makes me want to ask you this next question. With all the work that you all doing and all the efforts that you all doing, how has the working conditions changed for a lot of farmers when it comes down to the environment in which they're working in? I know you gave us a little bit about the environment in which people are living in, but when it comes down to the environment in which they're working in, how has, the initiatives that you all have been putting out or pressing back, I should say, how has it been helping you?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. And so yeah, to give it a little bit of background of the dairy industry, before the Meal with Dignity program, there was really no standards when it came to protection from the workplace, and beside outside of Meal with Dignity program, there's no standards for protections or in the workplace. And so part of the reality is that if you're a migrant worker milking cows, you're working with a lot of chemicals, food baths, chlorine, a bunch of different chemicals, and so there's a lot of lack of protections. You don't have the necessary training when you start working on a farm. You don't have the protective equipment to be able to perform certain jobs. And so through the Meal with Dignity program, we have seen that there's training that is provided for farm workers. If you're new, if you're starting a farm, you have the right to receive training. You have the right to receive the personal protective equipment, and through the program, we've really created standards to make sure that workers are feeling safe in the workplace. And yeah, and but outside of the Movie Dignity program, there isn't much of that, and so that is why part of the
And I
reason.
know, and I
Mhm.
know, Abel, that you all get a lot of pushback too, right? And I want to ask this question because I'm kind of interested, right? When it comes down to the farm workers' rights, right? And then the environmental justice issues that you all deal with, when it comes down to like the agricultural corporations that you name, like the dairy corporations, the Ben and Jerry's and X, Y, and Z, the pushback happens. How do you fight big companies like that on simple things like, farmers' rights and just environmental justice issues when it comes down to just simply a workplace, a working condition?
Mhm. Yeah, that is uh that's a good question. And so one of the things that we have done with our community was to really understand sort of what are the main issues that are affecting our community in the dairy industry, in the workplace, or in the living conditions. And so we did a survey. We've done a couple of different surveys to try to understand what are those biggest issues that people are facing. And through those surveys, we basically created standards, for what dignity means for workers. And so, when we approach these companies and the companies say, hey, these are not issues that are happening in my supply chain. They're not happening in the places where I buy my milk from. You know, we have this data that backs it up. Okay,
Yeah.
we've done the surveys. We interview workers. Um, you know, um, and this could be happening in the supply chain, human right abuses, the lack of protected equipment, the accidents that are happening, sort of all of the issues that are found. And so, when companies say, hey, these are not things that are happening in my supply chain, that's what we've done is basically empower our community to come out, and speak up against sort of, when the company says this is not happening, workers come out of the farms and share the stories of what's really happening in the workplace, in the living conditions. And it is through through sharing those stories, that we've been able to change. Ben and Jerry's, we won Ben and Jerry's. Ben and Jerry's is part of the Meal with Dignity program.
Mhm.
And
I
we are,
love that we won against Ben and Jerry's. I love that
yeah.
energy.
Yeah, but it was basically people sharing their stories, and otherwise, just saying, "Hey, there's these issues," but if there's not a community behind it, nothing is going to happen. But with communities behind it, when people are empowered and not afraid to come out and speak up against the injustices that are happening in the workplace, that's when companies are really start shaking, and that's when consumers really start to question, well, are
Yeah.
these products that I'm buying fair? Are they, do they have human rights and justice in them? And a lot of the times, it's not. And I think people are starting to ask these questions when they're starting to buy the dairy products, where it is, cheese, yogurt, dairy, or milk. Consumers are starting to ask their products. Okay,
And I want to ask you, a question about just the public health crisis, right? So when we think about, migrant workers, or just people who are coming over in general, 9 times out of 10, they're not necessarily in the best health condition because they've done everything they could to come to America, right? So then they get here, like you said, they don't get the access to the proper health care. They don't get the access to being able to get a driver's license so they can get the proper work or whatever they need, housing they need to actually be able to sustain themselves. So I wanted to ask you, with all the working conditions and living conditions, as far as what migrants have to deal with, what do you see being the fight that people actually want to get involved in? Because that is a lot. You got to fight for your living conditions. You got to fight for your working conditions. Where do you see more migrants having, that energy or that fight within to go after something? To go after which one, I should say, the living conditions or the working conditions?
Yeah, it's a good question. So through the program, through the Meal with Dignity program, we're addressing both issues. We're addressing sort of living conditions and working
So it
conditions.
goes hand in hand, no matter what. You don't ever separate them.
Yeah, yeah. Like we have, for example, there's 5 things on the Meal with Dignity program. One is sort of education. So you receive education about your rights. What those are. there is an economic redistribution. So companies redistribute, there's money coming directly from the company into workers' pockets and into the farmers' pockets so
Okay.
that they can also be able to make those changes. There is a third party monitoring body with, and that is really the teeth of the program. Like we can have great rights and speak about, oh, we have this and we have that, but if those things are not really happening at the workplace, that doesn't really mean anything. And so we have a third party that goes out, talk to workers, and there's a legally binding agreement to make sure that companies comply with what they sign up to.
I love that.
The code of conduct, which is the final one, the code of conduct that was created by workers themselves. And so when a company joins onto the program, they're really joining these sort of, these standards that were created by workers that really have a clear definition for housing, for working conditions. What happens if I, get into a workplace accident here and I'm not going to be able to work for half a year? There's all of those steps are sort of in the program.
And that
Yeah.
makes me want to ask you this as well, Abel, because, when it comes down to the challenges of just being a farmer in general and working on the farm, there has a lot of hazards, right? You have the chemical hazards, the pesticide, just the overall environment that come along with it. So we haven't necessarily talked a little bit about that, but I want to ask you, just in your personal opinion, with the things that people have to deal with by working on a farm and being in these dairy factories, what are they actually being exposed to as far as like the harmful chemicals that they're being exposed to, and how is that actually affecting them in their health wise?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a lot of the times, or one of the most common chemicals that is used in dairy farms is food baths to, clean the food of the cows and make sure there's no fungus or none of that. So food baths, and there's two forms of it. There's a liquid form and a powder form. So when there's a liquid form, cows step on it and pretty much bring it all over the parlor or the farm. And so you're really exposed to it, throughout the entire sort of operation that is happening. And when there's the powder form, pretty much when you're sort of applying it, that is when it's more risky. And so there's formaldehyde, that's what it's called, the food bath or formaldehyde, both liquid and a powder form. And there's also a lot of chlorine or Clorox that gets used, a lot of different kind of soaps. So you're exposed to a bunch of chemicals that can pretty much affect your breathing, your lungs. And we have had people that, have sort of breathing in sort of the powder or the liquid and, have respiratory issues. But on top of that, I think one of the biggest hazards, it's sort of the animals themselves, the cows. You're making, milking hundreds of pound animals. You can easily get run over by a cow or squeezed by in between the cows. There's pretty much happens almost every single day when somebody gets hurt or kicked by cows. So on top you have the chemicals, and then you have the hazards from the animals. And so, you really have to really know what you're doing and sort of receive proper training. And in a lot of the times, it's kind of fast-paced job. You have to milk the cows really fast because there's another one coming, and you're doing this 24/7. The cows don't get, you don't stop to milk the cows. You continue to milk them every single day, multiple shifts a day. And so on top of that, you're working a lot and you're tired. And so yeah, it's a whole thing of different combinations of things that are happening in
I like
dairy.
that. And Abel, we're about to wrap up today's conversation. I appreciate you coming through this morning and having this conversation with us. You gave me a lot of insight from things that I did not know, but I'm definitely curious about knowing more about. Again, that's why I wanted to bring you on this WURD show. So, we can get to know more about what our brown communities are dealing with and how they are actually going about finding solutions for these problems. And I feel like together we can actually help each other and become stronger. But I wanted to ask you this last question, how can the broader environmental justice movement learn from the collaborative of like working with farm worker organizations for like more human rights? Like, how can we help each other as we sitting here talking about environmental justice? How can we collaborate a little bit more with farm workers or farm organizations for more human rights?
Yeah, I think one of the things that we always tell people, is, look up Migrant Justice or look up our work, and start following the organizations, where sort of people are leading, where you see the community involved, or where people are sort of leading the campaigns or leading their actions. When people have defined exactly what is it that they need, and they're sort of fighting for those asks. I think, sometimes as allies or consumers, we tend to jump in and, oh, okay, this is what we need to do, and this is what this community needs. And I think stepping back, if we are consumers, if we're allies
Big
to the
facts.
struggle or to the cause, step back, and create this space so that people can lead those actions, those events, and empower themselves. That's how we've
Big
done it
facts.
here. And I think that is a good step. And also showing up, if you see that there's an action happening, and it's a worker action or a community-led action, show up, be present. And I think a lot of times we don't do that enough. We're not present enough, and we don't support each other's struggle enough. We're sort of doing our own work in our own silos, and sort of coming out when there's some massive actions. But I think we need to start creating those connections, creating those relationships, the allyship, and sort of showing up when there's something that is happening.
For sure, for sure. Abel, I appreciate you. Hashtag milk with dignity right now. Everyone, if you're listening, spread the word, spread the message. Abel, how can people find more information about the organization and what you all have going on?
Yeah, you can go to migrantjustice.net. That is our website, or you can find us on Facebook as Migrant Justice, Twitter and Instagram. Yeah, there's a lot of work going on with Hannaford's campaign. If you guys have a time or a chance, take action with Hannaford's right on their Facebook page. Check out their messages, and you'll see what people are doing there.
No doubt. Abel, I appreciate you coming through. I hope you have a great weekend, and continue to do the work, man. The work that you're doing is needed. And I thank you so much for taking a stance for people, who actually need help. You know what I mean? I appreciate you doing the work for sure. Thank you so much. And I look forward to talking and connecting with you soon.
Yeah, thank you guys, and happy to be part of the show today. Thank
No
you.
doubt. You already know we about to go to a quick commercial break. Right after this quick commercial break, we got more coming up on WRD. Stay locked. And don't forget, we're still trying to get more members. We're trying to get to that 2,000 mark. So you still got time to become a member here on 900 AM WRD, 96.1 WURD Radio. We'll be right back. It's your girl, P.O.C.